I think that everybody is born creative. Creativity is our soul's way of communicating with the world. It is the way that we express who we are, how we feel, what we think. We all have some form of that.
Questions I get asked most about my work is, how did I get started? I always feel so much pressure to have some long and romanticized story about how I just knew I wanted to be an artist from the time I could remember. But that is not how my story goes. On some level, I suppose I did want this, or some version of it. I was the only girl stuck in the middle of two brothers, and I did my best to fit in with them, but, well, as the family story goes, I rarely lasted long in tackle football games in the yard, so a lot of my time was spent entertaining myself in my own head. I remember being creative, but not so much in the way that screamed natural-born artist. I just remember being a kid who had a wild imagination. I created the outlines of my Barbie dream houses on my bedroom floor out of the plethora of my mom's 1980s belts in her closet and laid in bed thinking of vivid storylines until I drifted off to sleep. On some level, I guess I did romanticize life until life became too real to continue doing so. Slowly, the imaginative side of me was replaced by the insecure and uncertain teenager who found it more important to blend in than stand out on her own. However, I do remember my favorite class in high school was art, and in college I was drawn to art history and daydreamed of moving to Paris to curate art for galleries. However, I lacked the confidence to forge my own path, and instead folded into the mold of what I perceived as normal. My 20s were spent incredibly lost, and at the age of 24, I went through my first medical crisis. This changed me in ways I never knew was possible. It left me reeling in anger and confusion and undiagnosed CPTSD, and I bounced around from thing to thing, constantly searching for what felt most like me. Except there was a problem. Nothing I tried on felt like me. Then one day when I was 28 and more lost than ever, I sat at the dining room table of my friend's house where I had been living for the past few months. Tears were rolling down my cheeks. I cradled my head in my hand and cried out, "What am I here to do? Please give me something." I think it was that moment that started me on a very different path. It was the moment that I first realized I needed to start following those little breadcrumbs that life was always giving me. And thus is the beginning of me slowly coming back to my creative side.
So I just realized that my pets are always going to be in these videos because they are the neediest pets ever. I'm sorry, you are though. I love you. I thought that I would switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about my creative journey, how I became a full-time artist. I've shared a little bit in a previous video, but it's way back there. So as I've mentioned in other videos, I am 42 years old, and I didn't really realize that I was an artist until I was about 35. I started diving deeper into my creative side when I was probably in my early 30s. I lived in Oregon and I was married and I had a house, and it really started off with just me exploring the DIY world more and blogging about it, which was really fun, super expansive for me to just kind of tap into this side of myself. As I said in the intro, if I look back, I was always very, very creative. I just had a very black and white view of what creativity and artistry even looked like. I thought that you had to paint, do sculptures of some kind. It was just kind of what the stereotypical artist was. What I've come to realize over the last few years is that artistry is everything. I hear so many people say that they don't think that they're creative, but I just don't think that that is true. I think that everybody is born creative. Creativity is our soul's way of communicating with the world. It is the way that we express who we are, how we feel, what we think, and we all have some form of that. Maybe you express it a little bit differently, or maybe you just haven't tapped into it. I think that everybody is born creative. Art is super subjective. It doesn't have to fit into this little perfect canister that we as a society has deemed appropriate. There are so many different forms of art, and it really opened my eyes to this when I started doing markets for my version of art. I just saw how many talented people were out in the world, how amazing it is that there are so many different forms of art out there, because the world would be a super boring place if we all didn't have our own versions of what creativity and artistry is. So as I mentioned in the intro, you heard a little bit about how I started tapping into my creativity. As a kid, I was really creative. I was actually talking to my mom about this the other day, and she said, Amanda, you were always creative. And I think my version of what creativity was obviously, again, very black and white. So I never thought of myself as a creative person. When I was younger, I had the wildest imagination. I came up with so many vivid storylines, I would act them out in my head. I was always very lost in my imagination. I was also a highly emotional and dramatic person, and I always wanted to be an actress, but I just was painfully shy, so I never really jumped at it. But if I could go back and do anything over, I would definitely go into theater and explore that side of myself more. I guess I could now, but I have so much other stuff going on now that I'm not sure that I have that desire anymore. Who knows? There's always time to explore that side of myself, I guess. I really think that I lost my creative artist side probably in my early teens, when you get so caught up with just wanting to fit in. You don't want to be different. I was painfully insecure, painfully shy. I just wanted to blend in. I just wanted to be like everybody else. It was already bad enough that I had naturally curly hair and everybody else had straight hair. I was trying to navigate that. I had a round face when I was younger. I had braces. I was super awkward. So I was just not wanting to stand out. And then when I got to high school, my favorite class was art. And I remember two pivotal things happened in my life. It made me realize that I had a desire to explore my creative side more. The first one was in high school. Every week we'd have these art assignments, and we'd have to turn in a sketchbook, and she would assign us something to draw. And she would always mention how I had a great foundation and that I should continue exploring this more. Of course, I didn't listen. Then I went to college, my first college, and I took an art history class and loved it. I wanted to move to Paris and curate art for galleries. I remember feeling so alive in that class and just wanting to absorb all of the information. When I went back to college, or I dropped out of college and then went back to finish my degree when I was 24. For my final class, it was my senior class, and we had to do some kind of senior project. And there were 7 different options. And the option that I chose was to write a reflective paper. And then at this time, when I was 24, I had surgery that ended up going terribly wrong, and I almost died from it. Then a year after that, my mom was diagnosed with colon cancer. A year prior to me, my brother was diagnosed with colon cancer, and then 2 years before that, my mom went through endometrial cancer. I decided to write my paper on my family's journey with cancer. So I poured everything into it. I told the story. I wasn't the most academic person. The way that I learned, we don't teach that way in schools. When I went back to college for the second time, I was pretty determined to do my best. And then I got sick, and I came back to school, and I had a lot of unresolved trauma. My grades started suffering again. The last quarter, I had this senior class, and I was determined to do well the last quarter of school and just finish off the way I had wanted to do the whole year. I started off really strong. I got A's in all my classes. I get my paper back and he hands it back to me face down. I think just because in high school and junior high, I never really excelled, was used to getting not the best grades. I just kind of was like, oh, you know, let's see what this is. And I flipped the paper over and I looked at my grade and I got an A-. I missed 2 points. What really stuck out to me was the comment that my professor left. And he said, I don't care what you have to do whatever you can to get this paper published. It was in that moment I realized there was a potential for something so much greater inside of me. It was almost like it gave me permission or unlocked this creative path. And then all of a sudden, all these little breadcrumbs were placed on it over the course of the next few years that led me to where I am today. I think that we are all creative, and I think that it's just hard to stay on that path because either we feel like we have to turn whatever form of art we love into a side hustle, or we can't do it at all. There's so much pressure to turn everything into a job or to make money off of it, and sometimes you just need to create. There's so much pressure on social media now for especially makers and artists, or any small business for that matter, to constantly be creating. All this content creation that goes into social media now, creating reels, it's all video format, which is very time consuming. Sometimes I think as an artist and as a creative, I have to remember to create for myself and turn the camera off and not feel like I have to film everything, because I almost think that sometimes that just dims the creative fire when you're constantly having to stop. That's honestly why I don't do a lot of furniture flipping tutorials on my YouTube channel, because I don't want to have to stop the flow that I'm in, because that's such an important part of being an artist and being a creative, is being in that flow. I feel like I'm just rambling here. I really wanted to get across that it doesn't have to look any certain way. You get to create your own creative path, whether you want to turn it into a business or you just want to do it to fill your own soul. That's your prerogative, and just stay true to yourself. Tapping into our creative side is such an important part of being human. As I said, I think it's the way our soul communicates with the world. And there are so many different forms of creativity and artistry. And it's not just about painting or drawing or sculpting things or whatever. It is about tapping into who you are and putting that out into the world in whatever form feels natural to you. I think the level of joy that I have felt in my life since I started going down my creative path is something that I never thought that I would ever find. Because in my 20s, I felt so lost and confused and constantly searching for that thing that felt most like me. I would just lay in bed sometimes and cry because I just never thought that I would find that thing that felt most true to me. Even when things feel hard and stressful, I don't think I would change anything in regards to what I do, because every day I wake up and I'm excited to work and I'm excited to get back to work. I want you to know that you are creative. It doesn't have to look like anybody else's creativity. You have your own form of artistry. Baker's snoring right now, so if you can hear little snores, it's him. I'll show you. It's really cute. I will say it feels really good to have pets that are so cuddly and lovey. You know, if there's anything else you want to know, I am an open book. I would love to share more. Leave a comment below if there's something that you want me to focus on, and I'd be more than happy to. If you haven't subscribed yet, I would love for you to do so. Hit the thumbs up so you'll be notified, and I am just very grateful that you are here. I'll see you next time. Bye.